Okay, I think we should be ready to go. Hopefully captioning is hooked up. So thank you guys for joining us today to learn about an introduction to accessibility in Adobe PDF. I want to thank AT3 for allowing us to put on this webinar. And I also wanted to let you guys know that we are recording this. As well as this, or I'm sorry, the recording as well as the slides should be available for you on the AT3 website. So we'll be sending out some information about that after this is completed. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump into the content. It looks like most of our attendees are here. And I wanted to start off by talking a little bit about what we'll cover today. So first things first, we'll kind of talk about what a PDF is and what an accessible PDF is specifically. And then we'll get into some more specifics, such as the tag tree, and talk a little bit about what tags are and how those things work out in the tag tree. And then we'll also go through the reading order side of things. When you think about reading order, the tag tree reading order in the tag tree is one of the most important things to cover in PDF. So we'll definitely make sure to hit that. And then last thing, we will get everything set up in Adobe Acrobat Pro DC so that you are ready for the April webinar in which we will cover some more remediation facts. I also wanted to mention at this point in time that we are using Adobe Acrobat Pro DC in this series. So you'll get the most out of this series if you actually have Adobe Acrobat Pro DC and are actually using that version. I think mine actually just updated yesterday, so what you'll see today is the most up-to-date version that we have available to us. So to get into what exactly a PDF is, I want to just give a brief overview of what kind of documents they are, kind of compared to a Microsoft Office document. So PDF actually stands for Portable Document Format, and they were really created as a way to kind of send more secure, less easily editable documents, so that people could actually also access them through different platforms, so that it was, someone didn't have to have Microsoft Word to actually open a document. PDF is a little more usable on different types of tools. They are different than text-based documents, such as Word or PowerPoint. And we actually do use Adobe Acrobat Pro to make them accessible. One other caveat I wanted to mention here as well is I think Adobe has gotten a lot better in recent years about allowing you to edit documents using Acrobat Pro, but I don't actually recommend doing that just because it can actually affect the tags. So you really want to kind of consider them different from Word documents or PowerPoint documents where you actually can make changes to the text and the content, etc. So just keep that in mind as you're kind of go along, or if you ever have anything you might need to change or want to change in Acrobat, it might not be in your best interest to do so. So where do PDFs come from? There are several ways we can actually have a PDF that is generated. The first is from a web application or another program that kind of spits it out automatically. An example is a bank statement. So you may be on your banking website, you want to pull a bank statement that is from April to May, for instance, and it'll actually spit out a PDF for you to download. So that's one example. Then we also have PDFs that come from things like Microsoft Word or Microsoft PowerPoint. So in those cases, the documents are actually edited in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint and then converted using a conversion tool, which we'll cover a little bit later. And then we also have document scans. So these are physical documents that someone has actually printed out, and we want to actually get it into a digital format that is accessible. So there is a little bit different of a workflow with those than there would be with the other two types of documents. And these are just some examples, so just something to keep in mind. Some things that we can, or some ways we can kind of look at these different types of documents are in sort of how we might want to make them accessible. So what kinds of things are involved in making these documents accessible from point A to point B. So with things like that bank statement I was mentioning earlier, that's more of an auto-generated PDF that comes from a program, they are most likely going to need remediation or tagging, unless, of course, the developers of the program have actually considered accessibility and have incorporated that into the PDF itself. Then in that case, they would be accessible. But unfortunately, that is a pretty tough topic to tackle, and I don't know that I have actually personally seen many documents that come from auto-generated programs that are actually accessible from the start. We also have that second type, which is the PDFs that are converted from something like Microsoft Office. So hopefully a lot of you actually were able to attend the first two webinars in this series that were on Microsoft Word and Microsoft PowerPoint. So you learned a lot about how to make those types of documents accessible. And if accessibility has been baked into those documents, there should be little or no remediation of tags that needs to be done in Acrobat. So really, this is kind of the middle option here, but it's actually one of the best scenarios that we can possibly have. And while we're talking about this particular type of document as well, it's typically the most easy to edit and change. So a kind of general rule of thumb to think about when it comes to PDF accessibility is that the source document is always best. So you should go back to it, if at all, if you can. And then the last thing we have is scan documents again. And so these actually need a couple of steps or a few steps to make them accessible. So first off, they need to actually be scanned in and run through optical character recognition, which is OCR for short. And then they need to be tagged as well. So there are a couple of steps to get those in and made into an accessible document. So what exactly is an accessible PDF? We've talked a little bit about what kinds of documents we potentially get in. So now how do we actually make these things accessible, no matter what format they come in or tool that they come from? So a PDF that's accessible is actually a PDF that has tags to make the document structure available to assistive technology such as a screen reader or a Braille device. However, tags are not the only thing to consider when we are thinking about PDF accessibility. It gets the bulk of the focus just because that is where a lot of the effort lies. But there are things you need to consider, just like we talked about in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint as well. And those things are things such as color contrast or reliance on color. So there are times when we might actually need to consider these before we start tagging so that we actually make them integrated into our plan for how we remediate a PDF. And I wanted to make a small note about conversion from Microsoft Office, since that is what we've kind of covered so far, and I just wanted to make sure, really concrete these ideas into your minds so that you really know which options you can and cannot use when thinking about converting from a Microsoft Office document. So the first rule really is that we do not use print to PDF and expect it to be fully accessible. When we use the print to PDF option, it actually just creates an image of the PDF. And it often doesn't bring over any of the content, depends on the document that you're using or converting. But this is just a general rule of thumb. Tags do not get added at all. So especially if you have actually taken all the time in Microsoft Office to create an accessible document, if you use the print to PDF function, you're going to lose all of that work that you did. And then we also, we do have two options to actually convert these documents into an accessible PDF, especially again, if we've done the work that we needed to in Microsoft Office to make those documents accessible. And we have two options for that. The first is a Microsoft Converter. And so all of you who have Microsoft Office will have this option. So that option is actually under the File menu. If you click Save As, then that will bring up your Microsoft Conversion tool, and it will add all of the tags there for you. The other option that you have is to use the Adobe Converter. This one is only available if you actually have Adobe Acrobat Pro. And this one is available again in the File menu. You just click File and then Save as Adobe PDF. Either of these two options work. They do work a little bit differently, but especially again, if you've done the due diligence in Microsoft Word, for instance, and you've added your heading styles, list styles, alt text, these will both put out a very similar accessible document. Okay, so next up, I wanted to kind of start delving into the tag tree. So when we are talking about tags, I've kind of already mentioned this as we've gone along so far, but they are really the key. They are what assistive technology like screen readers use to read that content. And they actually contain both the content itself and the type of tag that it is. So for instance, you have a piece of content that is marked up using heading style. So, you know, it's bolder, larger, what have you. And hopefully if this is a document that's coming from Microsoft Word, it has been applied using, or these differences have been applied using the styles that we learned about in the last two webinars. But the important thing here is that there is a heading, or a heading tag type of a heading level 1 or a heading level 2. So we're seeing that same thing replicated here from the styles into PDF as well. Another example is an image that's tagged as a figure. Images, charts, etc., they're actually all figure tags within PDF. So there isn't just specifically an image tag or a chart tag. They're all just tagged as figures. And it has alt text attached to that tag to describe the meaning that it conveys. So that's really the gist of tags in general. And I'm going to start moving over here pretty soon into an actual document, and we'll kind of delve more into the structure of those, what they look like, and how they kind of work. So hopefully it concretes a little more as we go along. I wanted to show you two samples of a tag tree, just to kind of get you to the beginning of understanding the differences between the different tags and their types and how they work together. And what we have on the screen right now, it's just the same document. The one on the left is actually not been corrected in Word. It actually was created and just left with all the normal styles. So we didn't add any heading styles or list structures or table structures or anything like that. And then the one on the right is a Word document that actually was the same document. It's just we added our heading styles, list styles, and so on, so that we would have an accessible Word document to convert into the PDF. So the one on the left, we just have these tags that look, they're little left and right arrows, and then a P between them. So what that stands for is a paragraph tag. And every single regular paragraph that's assigned a normal style in Word is going to come over as a paragraph tag. And I may start calling those P tags as well. So paragraph tag or P tag, that's what those are. So you'll notice the one on the left, it only has P tags. So everything down the tag tree is actually just P tags. The one on the right, on the other hand, has been assigned a heading level 1 and some subheadings of heading level 2 and heading level 3. So visually, you can just see that they're kind of broken up very differently. And you're getting a lot more information from the one on the right rather than the one on the left. I included this slide in here. You can kind of use this as a reference. It's just the different types of tags and what they look like. So a paragraph, again, is just a left and right arrow with a P between the two arrows. And then that's kind of the standard way a tag is structured. So beyond that, we have headings, which are going to be denoted using the levels that they have. So a heading 1 is an H1 tag, and heading 2 is an H2 tag, and a heading 3 is an H3 tag. And then we keep going down. We have lists, which are just L tags. Links, it's just the full word spelled out, link within those two brackets. and then we have tables and figures, and I've kind of already talked about figures. We will cover tables more specifically in the third webinar, by the way, and lists and links more and headings and paragraphs as well in the next webinar. I wanted to specifically cover the last topic, which is artifact and background tags. And these are tags that are marked or that are actually decorations. So they're not really providing any meaningful content. So when we mark them using artifact tags, they are actually ignored by a screen reader. Some examples of artifacts are background images or decorative images. And you can think of these kinds of things as something that you might see on a cover page. So it's this really pretty decoration that somebody has included to really spice up the document. And those things are not necessarily providing any meaningful content. So we would mark those as artifacts. This one is actually kind of funny. I think it's a little bit of deception, but this might be where the actual term came from, but there are artifacts that you may get from scanned documents as well. So maybe those fuzzy gray things in the borders, those are actually potentially able to come in as tags or content in a PDF when you actually do that scanning. So we want to also make sure those are tagged as artifacts so that they're removed from any screen reader or assistive technology usage. Then we also have page headers and footers, as well as page numbers. These things often come from something like Microsoft Word or PowerPoint, and they are actually artifacted automatically when you convert to a PDF. So that's actually just kind of important to know in case the information that you're putting in there may be a link or something that's valuable to individuals. You may just want to make sure that it's actually represented elsewhere in the document if you are going to convert this to a PDF and share it as a PDF format. And the last one I have on there as an example of an artifact is blank character spaces. So I believe Rob mentioned this in his Word webinar, but if you hit the Enter key to create a new line, it actually can create a blank character space that will come over into your PDF. So with our abilities in PDF and Acrobat, we can actually mark those as artifact as well, so they just aren't cluttering up the tag tree and potentially being announced by something like a screen reader. The other thing to really pay attention to when you think about tags and structure in a PDF document is reading order. So using that tag tree, we want to make sure that the order of those tags from top to bottom follows exactly how the content would be read on that page. So again, we'll kind of move over into a document here in a second, but I just kind of wanted to give you the framework for what that might look like and how those things are intended to be used. When we're thinking about reading order and needing to edit it, we actually can do a drag and drop of the tags, or we can copy paste them to put them in the correct reading order. So that really should be something that you consider multiple times throughout the document. I will say with regards to tags, sometimes they do tend to move around on you, and you'll kind of start to notice that as you get into remediation more. Okay, so now what I'd like to do is move over into the document, and we'll just kind of start going through some of those concepts. So hopefully they start to line up a little bit more, better. But I'll also pause here. Does anyone have any questions at this time? If you would like to add them to the chat, it is available. And I also forgot to mention at the beginning, Rob Carr, who presented the last two webinars, is actually on here, able to help out with questions as they come in. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, I did get a question. Are recordings of the older webinars available online? I believe they should be. So for some of the things that I'm kind of skipping over, glossing over, I may talk about the tags, and you may wonder a little bit, how the heading styles matched up. Those recordings should help answer that as well. But we can definitely send out information about older webinars as well as the information for this new one. And I also got a question, is this only available in Acrobat DC Pro? Yes, you will only be able to look at the tag tree and add any accessibility features in Acrobat Pro. I won't say DC Pro. DC is the subscription model that Adobe has somewhat recently moved to within the last couple of years, I think. So if you do have an older version of Adobe Acrobat Pro, which would be like 10 or 11, these things can still be done. They just may look a little different than what I am going to be showing in these presentations. Okay, great. Okay. Looks like I think I've answered all the questions, so hopefully, yes, we will. And I just got another question. Will you provide the link to where we might find the older webinars? Absolutely, we can definitely do that. Okay. We will now kind of go through a sample document. So I'd like to start just by showing you sort of an example of a good document, one that's actually been corrected in tags. I think that's a little bit easier of a place to start. There is one thing wrong with the document. We'll find out as we go through. But other than that, let's just kind of go ahead and dive in. Before I get started with that, however, I want to go ahead and reset this so it's like what you see when you first open Adobe Acrobat. So if you you may already have these panes that I'll show you, or these tools that I will show you later added. But if you don't, we're going to kind of go through that quickly. And then the slide deck that I'll be sharing actually has instructions on how to add these things as well. So you can either choose to follow along right now and get your Acrobat set up if you have two screens. If you do not want to do that at this time, hopefully we can get that, or you can kind of follow along in those instructions on the slides and get that set up the way it needs to be before we start our next webinar in April. So first things first, we need to start with our navigation pane area. We need to make sure we have our tags pane up so that we can start seeing what those tags actually look like. And I let you guys cheat a little bit because I had mine up on accident when we started here. But to get this to add to your tags, I'm sorry, your navigation pane, you need to right click on your navigation pane area, anywhere in a white space. And when you do that, right click, you see a menu come up of all of the different options that you have for panes to add. We're going to find the one at the bottom that says tags and click it. And that will add our tag tree so that we can see all of our tags in this PDF. There is another way to do that. Within the file menu up at the very top, you see a view button. You should see a view button, and it actually has several options, and you want to click show hide and then navigation panes and then tags. And I'll kind of go through that one more time. So in the file menu, you can click the view tab and then go to show/hide and then go to navigation panes. And then the very bottom again, we have tags, and we see that there's a checkbox next to it, so we know that we've actually added it to our navigation pane. And once we've done that, we are ready to start looking through our tags. So you'll notice that we have tags piece at the top. That's really not what we're going to focus on today. The next thing you see is a section tag. And I just got a question about where's the sample PDF we should be working on from following along with. I'll be sharing that, or I can share that document with you later. I have not shared it as of this time. So hopefully you can just follow along. And if you have a document that you want to open, you can just kind of do that and get the things set up as we go along. Having this document isn't really necessary to this part right now. Glad I answered that question. Okay, so our first tag we have is a section tag. And that is not really so important for what we're talking about today. That was actually just what came over from Word when I actually did this conversion on this document. So that will actually not be announced by a screen reader. It's just there to kind of help you break up the content in your tags so that they're a little more easy to manage. A lot of the time you see this, it'll come in, especially from something like an InDesign document. It'll actually have multiple section tags, sometimes broken down by page, so they can be really helpful in helping you break down your content. I wanted to get a little bit more into the anatomy of the tag since we've just been in the PowerPoint before. But you'll notice that there are little arrows out to the left-hand side of each of these tags. These tags, or I'm sorry, this little button will actually expand your tags out so that you can see what's within them. So earlier I mentioned that the tag actually contains the content itself and the type of the tag that corresponds to that content. So that is what we're seeing illustrated here. So underneath this first paragraph tag, and let me go ahead and click on it just so we have all the other stuff cleared out. If we click on our paragraph tag, we see this is actually demo document that's highlighted. So this is an actual paragraph tag. We have our content that's within it. So we know that because it's being highlighted, and if we expand it, we can see that that content is in that tag. I also wanted to point out, not everyone, when they first start opening documents within Acrobat Pro, has the highlight feature turned on. So if you would like to turn that on, and I would definitely recommend it because it makes it a lot more easy to see where you're at in the document. You do a right click on any of the tags, and then you go down to the very bottom where it says highlight content, and you want to make sure that is checked. So I'll just show you that one more time. To get the highlight content box to show, you'll just right click on any of the tags and click highlight content. And when you do that, you should start to see a pink pink box that kind of highlights each piece of your content as you're navigating through the tags. So speaking of tag navigation, you can kind of either click on them to try to find what they correspond to, or you can just use the arrow keys and arrow down. I'm just clicking the arrow down key right now to get through all of these tags. So what we need to do when we first, so this is a document that's come from Microsoft Word, and really we know we did a good job on it in Word, so we're really just trying to check out to make sure things went over as they should have, that we got our headings in the right place, we got our lists in the right place, and so on and so forth. So what I would start doing at this point is really just looking through the tag tree and seeing if anything looks off. Well, our Easter egg isn't hard to find. I actually included it first, but our first tag is actually the demo document. So some of you may have noticed this I was clicking through a second ago, and if you did, awesome, you're on the right track to doing some great PDF remediation work. But that should actually be the tag that goes after the creating accessible documents text, not before. So what we need to make sure and do is get this adjusted. And so this is going back to that reading order thing I was talking about. We want to make sure that creating accessible documents, that tag goes before the demo documents tag so that they're actually read in the order that they are on the screen. So we have a couple of ways of doing that. We can actually click our demo document tag, and we know that we need to move that to be below this creating accessible documents tag. So we can do that, and I'll just do this really slowly, but I'm going to click on that demo document tag, and then I'm going to click and hold it again, just so I'm really showing you. And once we drag it underneath that second tag, which is where that creating accessible documents text is, you'll see that there's a long line that appears underneath that paragraph tag. what that's showing us is that we're actually going to be putting the demo document tag underneath that creating accessible documents tag. Okay, so when I let go of it, it happened very quickly, so you probably didn't see anything, especially since these are both paragraph tags. But now our order is different, so I'll just kind of start at the section tag, and I'm going to arrow down and show you what that looks like now. So now we have our creating accessible documents text tag that's first, and then we have our demo document tag second. So now those are in the correct order, and we've already done our part to remediate that section. I also wanted to note at this point, because some people may have questions on this, this is the title of the document, and I actually chose with this document not to make it a heading. Some people choose to make a title a heading 1, which is totally fine. The most important thing about headings is to make them consistent. So as I keep going down and looking through my content, I get down to this heading that's actually called headings, and it's my first heading 1. So it's the main, one of the main subsections of the document, or one of the main, I guess not subsections, but sections of the document. And then underneath that we have a paragraph, and then we have another heading 1 that's text, and then below it is a heading 2 that is called paragraph spacing. So what I'm doing at this point is just checking to make sure the tag types line up with the content that's on the screen and that they're in the right order. So far we're looking pretty good. And I think that was only the one Easter egg I left in the document there. So here's actually a paragraph. You can hardly see this, it's kind of small, but there's a little paragraph character that was left in the document, so we could actually get rid of that if we wanted to. But that's kind of moving ahead to the next webinar, so I'll just leave that alone for now. And as we keep going through, we just see that everything looks like it's in line. We get down and we see in this list, it's actually a list tag. And just to give you a preview of what a list tag kind of looks like, we have a list and then 4 list item tags underneath it. And these are called nested tags. And then with each list item, we actually have a nesting there as well. Right, so that's really the gist of reading order and tags at this point. Again, we're keeping it pretty simple within this particular webinar. So beyond the ideas of tags and reading order, I wanted to kind of finish out setting up our Acrobat to be ready to make accessible documents next time. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions? Okay, and Rob did just add a link to the previous webinars and their archive. So if you'd like to go watch those, they should be there at that link in the chat. Okay. Just a couple more seconds for some questions. I'm getting a question on the SECT tag. That's actually a section tag. And again, it's one of those that's actually not necessarily announced by a screen reader. It's more just used to help you organize your tags within the PDF in Acrobat. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and move on. And we'll get the rest of our Acrobat set up, and we'll just talk about a couple of the other tools that we'll be using over the rest of the series. So when you're in your Acrobat Pro DC, you should have a tab to the left of your document and kind of to the right of the Home tab that says Tools. When we get here, we have a lot of tools that we potentially could add, and some of these may have already been added. I couldn't exactly remember what it is default, and I couldn't get mine set back to default, so I don't think I removed all of them that I've added since I first started using Acrobat. But these are pretty easy to add and remove if you don't want them there anymore. So our first one we want to get up into our toolbar is Edit PDF. So that's in the Create and Edit section. We'll just click Edit PDF, the Add button within that, and we see it has appeared in our tool pane to the right-hand side of our main screen in our document area. The next thing we want to add is our Scan and OCR. So what this tool would be used actually to help out with those scan documents that come in and need OCR and any tagging that comes after that. And the Edit PDF, by the way, we'll actually use to talk about links. So for instance, if a document comes in and it doesn't have a link actually added and you need to add it manually, this is what you would use to add the link. Next one is down in Forms and Signatures. That's going to be Prepare Form. So we'll use that in the last webinar. That's going to be allowing us to create forms and then manipulate the form fields and make them part of the tag tree and so on and so forth. Then underneath Protect and Standardize, we have our accessibility tool. Need to make sure and have ready for us. And the last one is in Customize. It's the Action Wizard. So we'll add that one as well. So now my toolbar looks pretty full, but I do at this point have all the tools I'll need to make accessible PDF documents and forms and all that's in between. And to go over that really quickly again, and again, I'll share these slides so you have all of these tools and which ones you're going to need in the slides, but I'll just go over them one more time. We need Edit PDF, we need Scan and OCR, and then a couple of sections down, we need Prepare Form, Accessibility, and Action Wizard. And that should be it. So once I go back over to my document, you'll see my tools pane is still here. It looks a lot like it did when we were over in the tools tab, picking out which tools you wanted to use. And these will stay there, just like with the navigation pane. Since we added our tags pane, it shouldn't disappear on you. Every time you open up your Acrobat, you should have these tools available for you to use. And I'm getting a question about Mac, Acrobat for Mac. I have done a little bit of testing between the two versions, and I have not found any differences between Mac and PC. I think that's one of the things they've done a really good job of between the two versions. They've actually made them very consistent in Acrobat Pro DC. So any of you Mac users, you shouldn't have any trouble following along with all of this. Okay. Okay, we have somebody actually saying they do use a Mac and it looks all the same. Thank you, Darcy, for letting me know for sure on that one. Okay, so a couple of other things I wanted to point out while we're here. In our accessibility tool, when we open that up, we see quite a few options here. One of the things we're going to use a lot, and it opened up on the other window, but here we are, it's our reading order tool. So I just clicked that button at the bottom of my accessibility tool and get our reading order tool up. So this is what's going to allow us to select content and tag it. So it's really handy, especially if you have content that maybe came in and it has, you know, for instance, if this had all been tagged together, we can separate it. We can actually add tags from scratch. So if it's a document that doesn't have any tags altogether, we would use this tool to start editing that. So this is something to look forward to. We'll really get familiar with reading order in the next session, and hopefully you become pretty comfortable with it. I also wanted to point out the accessibility checker. So in the last couple webinars, we talked about the accessibility checkers that are part of PowerPoint and Word, and Acrobat has one as well. So if I click this full check button, it's actually meaning that it's running a full accessibility check. It opens up a window that tells me, or it's got several options that I can select. I have left these as they were when I first opened Acrobat, so I don't necessarily think you need to worry about changing any of these, but I would, if you maybe mess with it, just make sure all of these are checked, and leave everything else the same. You have an option at the top to create an accessibility report, and this will actually just save a document down for you. So if you wanted to potentially share this, I don't typically use that feature, but that's something that's available to you if you need it. So when we have all of our permissions set, or I'm sorry, our options selected that we want, we can click the Start Checking button, and it will open up to the left pane. So we're actually where our tag tree is in our navigation pane area. Now we have a new button that's called the Accessibility Checker. So this pops up after you have run an accessibility check. So we'll notice first off that we actually have found 3 issues in this document. But as we kind of open these and look through them, we'll see, okay, there weren't as many issues as we maybe thought. But what it's doing for this first one, that's got a little check mark, question mark next to it, logical reading order, needs manual check. All it's telling us is, hey, you want to check the reading order and make sure it looks right, because we can't do that for you. So it's just really reminding you that this is something you need to check on your own to make sure it looks okay before you're passing this document as accessible. If you have looked at this reading order like we have, you can actually right-click on the issue and you can click Pass or Fail, or you can skip it. The Explain button will actually take you out to some documentation from Adobe that explains what these rules mean. So that could be helpful for you if you're still wanting to kind of learn some more things about these issues that it's finding. And then we also have a Check Again. The Check Again button is really handy if you are starting to do your remediation and you, for instance, fix a table or a list or something, and you want to make sure that the tags have been fixed. That comes in handy for you. So we'll kind of play with that as we go along in the series as well. But for now, we've already checked this, so we'll actually go ahead and pass that logical reading order check. The next one we see is the title has failed. So this is actually an interesting one. I purposely took the title out of this. Sorry, no, I didn't. Yep, that was actually, I left it in the way it was, and I just got distracted by my own self there. So the title is in the File and Properties area. And this is actually the title that had come from Microsoft Word. So the reason why this was stopping me a little bit is because I knew that there was an actual title in there, but for some reason, there's a little bit of a bug in Adobe right now. If you're using a conversion tool, it actually doesn't pass that title automatically. So when I right-clicked and I clicked Fix, it went and looked at that title, saw that there was one there, and then it passed it. So just know that that's something we've been seeing lately. If you're converting a document from Word to a PDF, that may still show as wrong, but you actually have a title in there that's come from Word. Need to pass that one along to Adobe. The last one that we see as popping up is color contrast. So we see that that's saying, hey, you need to do a manual check on your color contrast. So that kind of goes back to what I was mentioning towards the beginning. Tags are important, but you also need to consider those things that aren't structure related, like the visual elements like color and everything like that. To go through a couple of other things, this checker will check for alternate text, and it will actually tell you whether there is alternate text or not. So that's a good way to kind of quickly check if you've hit every image. Of course, it's also not going to be able to check to see whether the alternate text is actually descriptive enough or not. So that's still something you'll probably need to manually check, but it's at least warning you if there's an image that has no alt text at all. It also is going to go check your tables and make sure the structures are logical. The same thing with lists. And with headings, what it looks for is to see if you have any headings that are not appropriately nested. So for instance, if you have a heading that skips from heading 1 to a heading 3, for instance, that's going to be caught by this checker. But again, this is only able to check certain things. It's not going to check everything for you. So that's definitely something to consider. It is a great tool to use though. Okay. And I see a question. It says, do you need to add the tools to each document? No, the tools are actually added to Acrobat itself. So every time you open Acrobat after you have your tools pane set up and your navigation set up, or I'm sorry, your navigation pane set up, they should stay the same. So you shouldn't have any trouble with things just disappearing on you. Your tool set should stay the same, be there ready for you to use every time you open a new document. All right, that is all the content that I had for today. I will go ahead and stay online for any more questions that you guys have. I thank you guys for your attention, and I hope to see you guys back in the next webinar. And before we go, and I do see some questions coming in, but before people start signing off, I wanted to I do have some resources in here, so I just have those in there to share with you, just some basic resources on PDF. And then I wanted to remind you the upcoming sessions, April 21st, we have the basics of remediating an accessible PDF. We have May 19th, accessible tables in PDF. So we'll cover how to actually use the table editor in that one. And then in June on the 16th, we have accessible PDF forms. So we'll go over all of the things you need to do to make an accessible form. And my contact info, feel free to ask me questions after this if you need to, especially about getting things set up for the next webinar. My email address is lissa.prince@okstate.edu. And again, I thank you guys, and I hope you have a great rest of your day and stay safe and well. And I will answer the questions coming in. So somebody's asking me if I can show the tools sidebar before closing. Yes. So if I close out, is that what you're looking for? Do you just wanted to see my tools pane? That was Stephanie that asked. Okay. If you need to take a screenshot, please do, Stephanie. I'll leave this up for just a little while. Sure, I can go ahead and drop the, if you'd like, I can go ahead and drop the resources into the chat. I think it'll let me. Okay, so on the version of, let's see, Laura first, I'm putting the links in. I think that they should work. Yeah, it looks like they worked. But again, I'll be sending out the PowerPoint will be available, so those should all be available to you in that format as well. The version of Acrobat that I'm using is specifically this version here, and I'm not sure I can actually 2020.006 blah blah blah, but it's actually Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. Does that answer your question, Gay? Okay, so it looks like, so you're thinking you have an, the tag option is grayed out. Interesting. Trying to think of what could be doing that. If you don't mind, you can go ahead and I'll just put my email address in the chat as well. Why don't you send me a screenshot of what it looks like, and I may be able to help you a little bit more that way. Absolutely. Definitely want to get you set up before we start next month. Yes, the webinar is being recorded right now, and it should be shared on the same page that Rob shared earlier, and I can go ahead and repeat that down below. So I'm just dropping the link into the chat for you right now. All right, I'll still keep hanging out if anybody has any questions. Jake, are you needing the link to this webinar, or that will be posted at the link that I just shared. Oh, I'm sorry, I've been sharing. Let's see here. Let me drop this back in here for you, Jake. There's the link. I didn't realize I was still on all panelists, so I wasn't sharing with everyone. And here are the resources again. All right, well, I'll go ahead and sign off. Again, thank you everybody who's still on and listening. I really appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing you guys all in the next webinar. Have a great day.